Okay, welcome back. Week 3, Lecture 2, Chapter 7, the Early Church. Why do we study? Why study missions history? Why study the early church? Well, we study church history, we study missions history because those periods inform our present. Our past informs our present and our future. And we study church and missionary history that we might be better missionaries, that we would learn from the past moving forward. The chapter in this book covers from the early Christian church after Jesus' ascension all the way through the 4th century. The question that I pose is, well, how did this small band of just over 100 believers at the time of Jesus' ascension grow to a few thousand by 100 AD, to the official empire religion in the 4th century, and to the worldwide movement that it is today? And certainly by studying all that church history, all that missions history, it's a fascinating study. We're not going to cover in this lecture all of the time periods between Jesus' ascension and the 4th century that are listed there. Do read it and definitely glean from it. It's very interesting to see how the Christian religion that starts as a legal religion because it was simply seen as a sect of Judaism grows into an illegal religion, into what became the national religion for the Roman Empire. But why did the church grow? Why, and this is on page 71 and 72, but why did the church grow? What was it? Number one, divine blessing. It was God's hand. It was God's ordained time, and it was God's ordained time for Jesus to come. It was God's ordained time, as we read about in the previous chapter, for Jesus to come and for Jesus to live out his life for the crucifixion, the resurrection to take place. And it was simply God's divine blessing during this period that the church would grow from just over 100 believers at the time of ascension until the 4th century, when it's the national religion for the Roman Empire, God's hand. And the same thing would be true today. When we see gospel expansion, rapid expansion, we see success in the mission fields, it's God's divine blessing. It's God's divine time for that place this time. It doesn't mean that we are failing in our work among our people groups. God ordains different times for different peoples, and that's what we saw in the early church. The zeal of early Christians. The church grew because the early Christians gave sacrificially. They were people of great faith. They gave sacrificially. They gave themselves sacrificially, willing to live, willing to die for the sake of the gospel. The appealing strategy, the uniqueness of the message of Jesus. And this was key at this point in time. The uniqueness of the message of Jesus compared to the other religions of the time was a major factor in the church growth. Key word there is simply unique, and in today's world with different religions, governments, with everything, it is still the uniqueness of the message of Jesus against all other religions of work. The gospel of grace, the message of Jesus, is still key in our success. So sticking to the message of Jesus obviously then leads to setting ourselves up for continued success in ministry. Organization and discipline of the church was key in its early growth. think through the structure of the church at that time, it was admirable that the church would maintain such organization. The church was universal in its reach. As we read through even the Old Testament, as we read through those biblical periods, different people had their own personal gods. Different people groups had their own personal gods, but yet the Christian message, the message of Jesus, was universal in its purpose, but it was also universal in its reach. And it wasn't. You just think about a tribal religion. A tribal religion a tribe has their religion, their practices, but they're not compelled to go and to convert. They're not compelled to go and take that religion to others. There's something about Christianity. Yes, we have the Great Commission, but there's something about the saving message of Jesus Christ that compels us to go, that compels us to share the message. The ethical standards of early Christians, a part of the zeal, a part of the organization of the church, was the ethical standards of early Christians. Now, I would hope that would be true today. That in our mission fields, it is the ethical lives of Christians that aids in the growth of the gospel. But unfortunately, we can travel around the world. We can go from people to people, country to country. And I think about the places I've been, and that even within the church, even the pastors are not living lives of just utmost ethics. Their ethical standards are very low. Their ethical standards aren't biblical. And so in our mission work, us personally as missionaries living lives of tremendous ethical standard, and establishing churches with leadership with tremendous ethical standard is key. Allowing our lives to speak the message of Jesus, and not just our lives, but the lives of the indigenous leadership that's being raised up. And then also physical reproduction. Christianity grew in the early days, just like the Jewish religion grew in its earliest of days. We're reading through the Old Testament, because the Jewish people multiplied their families. The Old Testament Judaism fulfilled in New Testament Christianity. We have a high value on human life, the sanctity of human life, and because of that sacredness of human life, our families are growing. Our biological, we have the biological growth, and through biological growth, it's not guaranteed that we have gospel growth, but certainly when Christians are multiplying, when Christians are protecting human life, and the message of Jesus is going out through that, then the religion grows. That's what was happening in the early church, and that is what can and is continuing to happen today. So as we look at the early church and why it grew, there are certainly principles there that we look at for today. It helps us understand how the church grew so quickly then, and these principles, though are not a guarantee, certainly set us up for success in our mission work when we impose them, when we implement them in our own missionary strategy methods. Okay, well, we'll see you online for the discussion board. Be sure and get over there and answer the questions and interact with each other on each other's questions, and I'll be over there interacting as well. Y'all have a good week.